Okay, thank you so much for again doing this, and I'm excited to hear about what Beyond Impact is doing to really strive for DEIA, or Disability, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility. But first, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in the disability community.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. My name's Tara Cunningham, and I started Beyond Impact, but my story goes way back into the year 2003 when I was a fundraiser for Down Syndrome Ireland. I lived in the country of Ireland for 16 years, and I had previously been in advertising. And I managed to get one of my old clients, Unilever, to donate 100,000 euro worth of ice cream vouchers so that families of kids with Down syndrome would have ice cream parties with free ice cream, and then people would pay for the ice cream, and that money would go towards the Center of Excellence. Now, I was completely ignorant. I did not know anybody with Down syndrome. I did not talk to a parent or a person with Down syndrome. I came up with this idea, got the job, and thought, this is going to be amazing. I'm going to help so many people. And I went to my very first meeting to launch the Down syndrome ice cream sundaes with Down syndrome Ireland. And a dad stood up in the back of the room and said, if I sell your ice cream, will my 7-year-old get speech therapy? And I said, absolutely. 10 years from now, we'll have a center of excellence. And he cut me right off and he said, 10 years is too late for my little boy. F you and F your ice cream. And he walked out the door. And I was like, what just happened? And so it's one of those moments in your life where you have two paths. I could have gone, what a jerk, and just kept on talking. But thankfully, I used to work for Ogilvy and Mather, and they taught us how to do focus groups. And I turned the room into a focus group to be like, where's this anger coming from? And it turned out that that guy's 7-year-old was kicked out of mainstream school because he couldn't communicate and put into a special needs school in the county of Roscommon where they had no speech and language therapy, no physical therapy, no occupational therapy. And I'm telling him to sell ice cream. And I was like, oh boy, am I in a new world? And parents, I was like, what would you do? And a lot of parents are like, we need speech therapy. If I knew what to do, I do it myself. You're a Yank. Wouldn't Americans come over to Ireland and we should do groups, and that way more people could get in? And then another person said, no, they group them by age, and your kid can speak, but my kid can't, and that won't help anybody. And it just turned into this nightmare. And every county I went to, I was learning more and more about the dysfunction of the programs and what wasn't there. And so I told my boyfriend, who's now my husband, I was like, somebody has to do something to help these people. And he's like, well, why don't you? And I was like, what the heck am I supposed to do? I don't know anything. And he goes, you're Tara J. List and figure it out. And because he said that, I was thinking about what the parents said. And long story short, I wound up inventing Ireland's first best practice in speech and language therapy. And it was awesome. I brought over the Yanks. I was able to get Irish speech therapists, and it became the way that speech and language therapy is done now. So that sounds like a really happy ending, but I wound up suing Ireland in the High Court for people with disabilities, and with the permission of our Prime Minister at the time. I was appointed to the National Disability Authority, and I was the Irish representative for the European Commission for healthcare innovation. So I learned really quickly that neurotypicals, non-disabled people come in, and I was one of them, with these grandiose ideas of how we're going to help the disabled, how we're going to help the neurodivergent. And without actually having a lived experience or understanding the lived experiences of others, there's absolutely no way you should be doing anything. And so I really, really learned, and I share my that dreadful discomfort of not understanding, of realizing the place of I was ignorant. It's the only word for it. I was ignorant with good intentions, and that doesn't help anybody. So I'm very open about how ignorant I was when I started. And I think that that's really important for people to know. I'm 20 years in the business and I'm still ignorant. Every day I learn something new from somebody else's experience. I will never stop learning. I know that for a fact. And I'll never stop trying to teach people the value that we all have. Fast forward a good few years, I wound up being the CEO of Specialisterna USA when I moved back to America, and they were the organization that started Autism at Work pilots in the world. And I was with them for about 3 years. When I decided to leave them, my timing was superb. January of 2020, I told the board I wasn't going to be working there anymore. And I stayed until April with that whole COVID thing, and then left to start Beyond Impact because I didn't want to do pilots anymore. I didn't believe that that is the way to create true inclusion. I believe that we don't need a second door for disabled and neurodivergent people to walk into employment. I think the way the majority of people's interview processes, onboarding processes, daily activities in an office, being able to be promoted are all made for a neurotypical person. And it needs to be changed so that it is inclusive, so that everybody can bring their best self and their best skills and strengths of what, instead of it being a popularity contest, answering the questions the best, can you do the bloody job, right? So a job description shouldn't be all corporate speak that nobody can understand. It should be, here are the 3 skills that we are looking for in this role, and can I do them? And if I can do them, I should be able to step forward and go for that job and have an equal opportunity because my skills match what you're looking for. And that's all that needs to happen. And if you look at what HR and talent acquisition is, it's supposed to find the best person with the best skills that will fit in the team. And what really happens is the person who answers the questions the best and the person who's more like everybody else on the team gets the job. And that just isn't successful. It's a really fun, Lazo. I love this. Gallup just put out their Q12 report, and I'll send you the link to it. And it shows that only 46% of employees actually know what is expected from them at work. That means 54% of people have no clue what they're supposed to do.
Mm.
That shows you how bad management is, how we have one way of communicating, and that's the way it's going to be. And what that does is it leaves the majority of people out of the just out, you know? And it's why people don't like their jobs. They don't know what they're
Mhm.
supposed to do.
Yeah, it's stunning statistics. Anyway, if I could just like move on here, I understand that you created Beyond Impact. Like what's that about? Like what motivated you to create this?
Yeah. So I think that companies have a big and small have a huge opportunity to benefit from the 20% of the community that are disabled or neurodivergent. I think that, like me back in 2003, in the front of that room saying, sell this ice cream and you're gonna, like, if you don't know or haven't been involved with disability inclusion or neurodivergent people, like if you don't know, then it's scary. And that's why there's so many diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility programs, because people aren't, so my generation, I'm 48, okay? When I went to school, disabled kids were in a separate classroom. The autistic kids were in a separate classroom. They went in separate buses. We didn't talk to them because we were told, don't leave them alone. Like, and we were taught, if you see somebody in a wheelchair, don't stare, and there are all these terrible messages that made us grow up thinking, I can't be a part of them. They were completely othered. And then enter my world in 2003, and I got to work with incredibly brilliant people with Down syndrome and people with cerebral palsy. And then I wound up being diagnosed with autism about 4 years ago. So I'm in the club. I didn't realize it, but um, I, when you actually see what we're missing out on, it's like, oh my God, a whole new world comes into play. And I hear, and one of the things that started me doing Beyond Impact was, I keep hearing that companies want diversity of thought, new ideas, innovative thinking, critical thinking. Okay, if that's what you want, well, then why aren't you hiring disabled people? Because from the second they wake up in the morning to the minute they go to bed at night, every single thing they do requires a different way of thinking. So, and every place they go requires innovation, critical thinking, an ability to adapt quickly. Like, that's just our lives, right? And so hire people that do that all the time. And in order to do that, you need to change the way you do your work practices. You need to change the way you hire. You need to change the way you manage and grade people on the work that they do. So, for example, if you are a tax accountant, and let's say you're neurodivergent, okay? Let's say you're autistic and you're really good at Excel and you're doing your job and you're brilliant at it. You do it really, really well. 20% of your benchmarking is what they call it, the grading system, is often communication. How do you sell yourself? How do you hang out with everybody on the team? Blah, blah, blah. If your job is a tax accountant, does it matter that you're popular in the office?
No.
Not a bit. And so I agree with you, so if a person doesn't communicate and is popular in the office, the best score they can get is an 80. But you might need a 90 out of 100 to become a manager. Is that person going to ever be a manager? No. Is that fair? No. So these are the things that are holding our community back. And it's just, we know now one size fits all does not fit all. And I know companies spend a lot of money with these processes and systems that they've developed, but the secret's out. It ain't working. So that's what my job is to try to make organizations aware of the things that they're doing that's hurting the disabled and neurodivergent people that are already in their jobs, as well as opening up their talent pipeline to purposefully include our people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My next question here is, how does like Beyond Impact strive for DEIA? What sorts of things do you sort of consider, at your company when, like, because certain companies, they often don't know how to really make their company more DEIA inclusive. So like, what are some of the things that you sort of strive for? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question, actually. Um, the so in my perfect world, someone would go, "Hey, I like what you're saying. Come on in here and break everything." But what typically happens is they go, would you do lunch and learn where you now that after COVID, it's great because we can do online meetings where employees come and I talk about how to look at all of your management systems with the neurodivergent lens. So that's, I try to make people look at what happens on their day to day and how they can make little tiny changes in their daily management and daily work together that would make life easier for everybody. And every time that happens, some people come out as neurodivergent, or they have a hidden disability, or they have a disability, and wouldn't that be great? Or better, not have a disability, not be neurodivergent, and go, why aren't we doing it this way? And I say better because if you've got neurotypicals saying this is the way it should be, we're not having them look at, oh, we're accommodating these people. It's where this will be better for everybody. And that's when the light goes off. That's when, or goes on. I also have dysnomia, so I use the wrong words all the time. So
Hmm.
that's when the light goes on, when people go, oh, so if it works for neurodivergent and disabled people, it'll make everybody better. Oh, if I communicate effectively, if I'm very explicit with what needs to be done, who's going to do it on the team based on their skill strengths, when it is due by, not later, but the actual day and time,
Hmm.
like, wow, my team is actually productive. My team is actually engaged. We're actually meeting our deadlines. This is a good thing, instead of, I need you guys to push the envelope. I need it later. That means nothing to anybody. And the only people that figure out what needs to be done are the cool guys that go out for either a smoke, or they go around the water cooler and they try to figure out what the manager wants. And then the cool guys go off and do stuff, and everybody else is still sitting at their desk going, huh? Right?
Yeah.
That's the typical day in a life of corporate America. And it doesn't work anymore. So bringing in our community forces people to think about the full story, what needs to be done, by when, and how. Who's got the skill strengths to do this? So, Lazo, I don't know you, but I would assume you're better at numbers than me, because I am appalling. The neurodivergent spiky profile, my numbers, I'm at the very bottom of I cannot do budgets. I am very lucky I married a money guy. He knows how to do the finances. I tell him, don't get hit by a bus, because I am a dead woman. I have no idea what's going on. But I used to be given the budgets to do. I'm
Hmm.
useless at it. So you could give me the budget. It'll take me 3.5 hours. But if I gave it to you, you're really good at it. You could do it in a half hour. Work's getting done, but are we being productive? No,
No.
absolutely not. So teams should be run by what they want to do. And but managers are scared of that, because what happens if somebody doesn't want to do something or can't do something? Well, that means you have a hole in your team, doesn't it? So you either need to, your next hire fills that hole, or you work with another team to do that. But now you know that there's a problem, so you can solve it. Instead of going, well, Tara's really crap at doing budgets, I'm going to give her a bad review.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
which is the way it works today, instead of
Yeah.
going, Tara's really good at writing, so we're going to give her all the writing stuff, So
Mm-hmm.
it's just a different way of managing. And to me, it's common sense, but it's just not the way it's done. So um, that's the passion in my life, and I love when people get it. And when they get it, those managers do really, really well. And all the other managers want a bit of that magic. And that's why you hear of all these companies that are really building out these neurodiversity inclusion and disability inclusion programs. It's not because it's a nice thing to do, it's because they're making money. They're making bank. Their teams aren't leaving. They have better employee engagement, like it's all the magic. And before COVID, I used to say it spreads like a virus.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't say that anymore. I just said it, but it everybody wants a piece of that. And that's so I call it a neurodivergent lens because if it works for neurodivergent individuals, it works for everybody. And that's what Beyond Impact is.
Mm-hmm. So like who are like the main stakeholders that you sort of bring in to sort of say, hey, DEIA needs to be prioritized. Is it the companies? Is it certain individuals? Who's involved?
Okay. So that is a big question. So sometimes it comes from, say, a hiring manager who has a kid with a disability or who's neurodivergent, and they recognize that their company isn't doing enough. So they use all of their social capital, like all of who they know, to try to start up a program. And it takes ages, ages and ages and ages for them to try to sell this idea. Another way people do it is through the employee resource groups. That's a generalized term for groups of people that say, I associate myself with that. So if a company has a disability or a neurodivergent group, or sometimes they're combined, the people that belong in that say, we want to positively um, change the way things are going, and they internally fight for an inclusion program. Then you've got you might have heard this term, the war for talent. So
Mm-hmm.
okay, so in the technology space now, we're in a weird space right now where there's lots of jobs being lost at the moment because of the way the economy is going, and especially in the tech sector. But finding individuals that have specific skills, like coding skills. We'll just do coding. That's a nice, easy one. Uh, there aren't enough people in America with those skills to get to fill those roles. Okay. And there was SAP and Microsoft realized that one of the ways we can fill these roles are with college graduates that are autistic, that aren't making it through our typical program. So Microsoft found that after doing this for 3 or 4 years, of all the people that made it through their Autism at Work program, which is what it was called back then, um, every single one of them, 50% didn't make it through the first interview in the traditional way, and the other 50% would have never applied for the job. So they would have lost 100% of the talent that they had brought on because either you wouldn't apply or they couldn't make it through the popularity contest. And so the people that are in talent acquisition, those are the people that are supposed to try to get people employed, or people in human resources, which depending on the company, the other place where you try to bring in people, I couldn't find them. And so they're like, oh, this is another potential, and they call it a pipeline. Here's another pipeline of people that will be able to tap into. So you may hear about the war for talent, building a new pipeline, tapping into untapped talent. This is a lot of speech that you'll hear. It's new language that's come out. All that means in normal language is, here's people we've overlooked for the last 5 decades, and maybe we should be looking at them because they have skills and talents we need. So that's what tapping into the untapped talent pipeline means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did not know that. I learn something new every day. Um,
Woo! Okay.
um, anyway, if I could ask, like, what impact does your work, at Beyond Impact have on, the disability, not just on the disability communities, but companies that you work with? If you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so I love this. So first, it's the people that never had a chance at a job, at a meaningful employment. I've had individuals with college degrees, 3.85 GPAs, and they were stacking shelves at Amazon. And because they couldn't win the popularity contest. And when they get that job, they're it's like they're new human. It's the most powerful, awesome thing in the world. Then you have the teams that are working with the individual, and they are so much happier, and because their managers are communicating effectively, they're working on stuff that means something to them, and it that changes so many other things. um I love it when those new managers become the champions of building this program out. That it's not the individual that got placed that becomes the poster child of, look at what we're doing. We don't want that. Like, we want the teams to be talking about, we need more, we need more, we need more. Like, let's make that happen. And when that happens, we see outcomes of higher employee retention. And I don't talk about the retention of our people, I'm talking about the entire group of individuals. They don't quit anymore. They love working where they're working. We see higher productivity. We see less absenteeism, and we see great camaraderie between everybody. And people really enjoy going to work. And so that's just pure magic for me. That's where it's at for me. So
Mm,
the companies are benefiting from a heck of a lot more money and productivity, but really the team gelling and people getting to be their true selves at work and being able to be innovative and critically think, and all those things that they're looking for, it finally starts happening. And that's what's fun.
hmm My next question here is, what can companies take away when, like, considering how to make their companies DEIA, inclusive, like.
So quick takeaways. I would say, think about the last week in your job. How many times were you left unclear about what you were supposed to do? How could that have been made more clear so that everybody understands what needs to happen? And how can I explain to my manager that this is the way I need to be communicated with, right? The person that is like, yeah, I never know, like that, those 54% of people that don't know, they are they are made up of disabled people, they are made up of neurodivergent people, they are made up of caregivers, they are made up of LGBTQ, they are single white males, like they're everybody. And so what companies need to do is realize there's a lot of things that aren't clear, and we're assuming knowledge. And by assuming knowledge, we are losing the opportunity to benefit from all the minds that are in our company. So that's the first thing. That's an easy one. The second thing is looking at your job descriptions. How much is it corporate speak? Like words that only if you're inside the company do you understand. Look at all the job descriptions and see ability to communicate both written and verbal. That's in almost every single job description you look at. Is that really a requirement? Because if it is, then by all means put it in there. But if you're that tax accountant who's just going to work on Excel spreadsheets, he might not apply for the job because of that line. And like we saw with Microsoft, 50% of people don't apply for those jobs. So look at your job description and see, is it inclusive? Are we putting things in here that don't matter? Do I need to make the language more clear and not corporate speak? So I always say the general rule of thumb, if you give this job description to your granny, would she know what the heck it meant? Yeah, you're shaking your head no. I would say 97% of job descriptions out there, granny couldn't understand. We want granny to understand it because then more people will apply for the roles. We want to open up that talent pipeline. So
Mm-hmm.
those are two big ones that I would do.
Mm-hmm. Those are some really important points there.